Hey everyone, how's it going there? Hope all is well. Today I got a different kind of video for you guys. This time it's going to be how to counter post-extreme force pendulum magicians. I guess I'll just go through like what kind of cards you might want to main deck or side in for this type of matchup. Particularly because they're going to be getting Electromite, and that'll be a big problem for a lot of decks, and it's going to help them out a lot. But I do think that there's plenty of hand traps and just plenty of other forms of removal that can definitely help you out. So the goal, particularly when you're going second, you want to stop them from making Electromite before they Pendulum Summon, because if they get the Electromite out before the Pendulum Summon, well, now they're looking good because now they have two zones to Pendulum Summon from the extra deck face up from. And also Electromite just allows them to plus ridiculously and dump stuff, whatever they want from the deck, and they can Pendulum Summon it out. Particularly, they may try to dump out a Sorcerer and use that to pop their Iris, or they could just dump out an Astrograph and use that to like plus immensely. So yeah, you definitely want to stop them from abusing the Astrograph, or if you can stop their Pendulum Summon entirely, that's also good. But with that out of the way, let's get into the first hand trap, which is a relatively inexpensive hand trap compared to some of the more expensive ones. But now, in order to use it against this deck, it may prove pricey with just how expensive Electromite may be. But Ghost Reaper and Winter Cherries. Now, this card, I believe, will see a lot of play because, I mean, especially if we're still in a spiral format, because everyone will still have their Helix as a Cherries target. And this card, if you have Electromite, you know, you just need one copy in your extra deck, and all you have to see is one Pendulum monster. You see a Joker get normal summoned, you see an Astrograph go in scale, ready to use its effect to tutor out a Stargazer from deck. You just, as soon as they got a monster on board, you just cherries that, reveal that a Heavy Metal foes Electromite, and you basically reduce them to playing a really crappy pre-Extreme Force version of Pendulum Magicians, because now their deck is designed around the Electromite, and now you just removed that key piece away from them. And what's really good about Ghost Reaper and Winter Cherries is because you are waiting for them to get, it's great for going it's only for going second, sorry, and you don't have to worry about deciphering your Gamma. Now I don't see, well, I'm unsure on this, how many people will be running this card. But it's kind of a problem that a lot of the other hand traps have against the deck, is that Gamma can counter that, and then they can Omega you, and now you're down a card. But with Ghost Reaper there, you don't have to worry about that. So in my opinion, it may be one of the best. Like, it's hard to say for sure, especially since we don't know what the meta will be like, but in my opinion, I think this will be definitely a really good card to have against the Pendulum matchup once Electromite becomes legal to play. So next up we got the Ghost Ogre, and Ghost Ogre is really nice because as soon as they do bring out Electromite, you can just, and it uses its effect to dump a card from the deck into the face up into the extra deck. You just Ogre them right then and there. Now they lost their Electromite. Of course, they still can Pendulum Summon if you haven't removed their other, if you haven't stopped them from making Electromite before the Pendulum Summon. You can just Ogre that Electromite, and now they can only Pendulum Summon one from the extra deck, and it kind of hurts them a little bit in their plays, where they'll have to make another Electromite afterwards. And so that just means that they won't be able to get as much advantage out of it, but it'll still be pretty ridiculous. It also with Ghost Ogre, it's good a little bit later on, maybe if you draw into it later and you're kind of grinding out the game a bit, and they're running low on resources, and they throw in a Wisdom Eye or something like that, and they go to use its effect. You can either get rid of it, or you can get rid of the Star Pendulum Graph that they may have face up on the field when that effect tries to go off. Either way, it's not a bad hand trap to have. I'm not sure where I'd put this between it and Troll in terms of how effective it is against the deck. I just feel with Ghost Ogre, again, being able to nuke that Electromite, they won't be able to gamma it if they are someone who's running gamma. Now I know for me personally, my Pendulum Magician build, I do enjoy running Cypher Gear Gamma just because I have a lot of Ash hate, and I do like to play the Pendulum Call and stuff like that. But of course, I don't think you do lose consistency, so I'm sure many players won't be. So at the same time, you may not have to worry about it at all, and then you're just free to just lay waste to their deck with an abundance of hand traps. And especially since Ghost Ogre and Droll will be getting reprints here in the Kaiba pack, I do think that, you know, within 2 months or less than 2 months, whatever it is, this could be a viable option to counter Pendulum Magicians. So onto the Droll unlock here. This could be the best one if you hit them right. You know, if their play is Astrograph and Scale, effect a special summon out the Stargazer, and then they normal summon Joker, you're pretty well set right there, because now they normal summon the Joker, effect to add, you just Droll them right there. Now then they can make their Electromite, but they're not going to be able to plus any, they're not going to be able to search anything out. I mean, sure, they can Harmonizing and special summon from the deck, but at that point, like, they're pretty limited in what they're able to do. You stop their searching. So Droll and Lockbird is a really powerful card in terms of it doesn't really disrupt, well, yeah, of course it disrupts their searching, but I mean, it doesn't really stop them from getting monsters on the board, but it limits them in how much advantage they're able to attain, or acquire, sorry. So on to the next one now. I do personally feel that Ash Blossom is actually the worst out of these 4 hand traps against Pendulum Magicians. Of course, unless you hit Pendulum Call, but just because if you, as they get going, it's hard to know when to Ash them, because you can try to Ash their Astrograph or their Chronograph in Scale when it goes to special summon from the deck, but I mean, if they have more cards in hand after that to just be able to lay in Scale and go off from there, now you just wasted an Ash, and they are still able to get a bunch of advantage. Or you can try to Ash them, you know, part way through. You try to Ash their Iris one time when they pop it with Electrum, or like, it's really hard to know when to Ash, because unless you know all the cards that they have in their hand and maybe face down, whatever, it's not as optimal as a hit, is I guess what I'm trying to say. Not to say that it's bad, especially if they are running Pendulum Call, because that is a really good way to cripple the deck. But of course, again, I run Pendulum Call, and I do love pairing that with Cypher Gear Gamma, so I'm just begging you to Ash me, and then I get to go into Gamma, and then Omega you, and now you're down your Ash, and you're down another card in your hand. So, one for the God hand trap, of course, Max C here. They are going to be doing lots of special summoning, so if you happen to not get anything else and you have Max C in hand, well, you just Max C them as they start summoning, and either that'll put a stop to their summoning, or you will just be able to draw, you know, 2 or 3 cards, maybe more, depending on how much they link summon, or if they go into Starving Venom, and that could either help you get into some forms of removal to break through their board, or just get you a hand trap in order to negate, stop something that they're doing. And talking about removal, probably the best way to remove a Pendulum Magician board is evenly matched. You know, this is severe Pendulum hate. Everybody sides it. Well, for a lot of decks, it's a really good card for a lot of decks. A lot of people hate this card, but it really is good going second, especially when your opponent builds a ridiculous board. But even against Pendulum Magicians, a problem with evenly matched is if they've double Omega'd you and then they do a Bagusaga, you can banish, you know, maybe 3 of their cards face down, but then they got 2 Omegas coming back on their turn, and you know, you've wasted your battle phase, so you really can't finish them that turn. So it's kind of give or take. I still feel like if you're able to afford it, or somebody who can run it, of course, you know, Ash Blossom again is an expensive card. The Electromite is an expensive way. We have some budget ways to kind of deal with the deck, but we'll get there when we get there. So yeah, evenly matched. Overall, pretty good card. And on to Typhoon. Here's an inexpensive way to deal with the Pendulum Magicians. It's really good going second, you know, because you can activate this from your hand if your opponent controls 2 or more spell trap cards. So of course they activate Scales, and you can pop one of them before, like say they set like a wisdom eye and a double iris, or what have you, or you know, they set a something in a star pendulum graph. Well, then you can remove that graph. You can remove the wisdom eye when they go before they use its effect, and that might just be enough to, if they don't have any way to pick up speed after that play, you may have had them right there. So Typhoon is a good option. It's a more budget option for sure. Another decent option that's actually picking up like it's getting a little bit more pricey right now, is Magical Spring. I'm sure some of you know what this does. Just you draw cards equal to a number of face-up spell and traps your opponent controls, and then discard equal to the number of face-up spell trap cards you control. So if they got, you know, a star, pendulum graph, and 2 scales, you're going to draw 3, and then you're going to discard 1 if this is your only face-up card. So it kind of allows you to fix your hand, and maybe you're able to get enough resources to be able to break through their board and go for game. This next card is another, it's going to be a really inexpensive hand trap coming out in Extreme Force. I'm unsure how I feel about it just because I haven't playtested it, and I know, like, my theory is that if they're going to try to go for an Electrumite before Pendulum summoning, you can drop this on them, and then they won't be able to make that Electrumite. They will have to make a Decode Talker. So it's like, that's where I feel it's not that great, because it gives them a Decode Talker, and they'll still be able to Pendulum summon out, you know, to 2 zones that it points to. They could still make an Electrumite. So I'm still unsure how I feel about it. This will be pretty good against the Burning Abyss when they get their Link Monster. But like I said, it's basically what Contact C does is when your opponent summons a monster, you special summon this card from your hand to their side of the field, and they can only fuse, Synchro, XC, or Link summon using that face-up card as a material. So of course, you know, the only thing they can really make, and if they have Decode in their extra deck, would be Decode Talker with this. So if they're not running Decode Talker, then you actually might screw them over, which isn't too bad. Another budget card, Effect Veiler, for hand trap, you know, a budget hand trap. It's, again, it's not the greatest. I still would highly advise just going for the Troll and the Ghost Ogre. You know, especially since they are getting cheaper reprints. They're still relatively inexpensive right now, as with Ghost Reaper, if you happen to get your hands on Electrumite, which will be expensive, unfortunately. But, you know, you can Veiler their Electrumite as soon as it plops on the field, and then that just stops them from one form of setting up. They'd have to Pendulum summon out, make another Electrumite, and, you know, it just stops them from maybe going into a double Omega or 1 Omega and a Bagooska play. It just kind of limits how far they can take their field, but they still, in the end, will be able to get over that just by still searching more. So it's still pretty iffy. Again, I haven't really tested it or anything, but this is just kind of theorizing as to how good it could fare against it. So on to some other forms. Like, this is nothing really too important per se. I just figured throw in some board wipes. I forgot to throw in some forms of like back row removal, like Twin Twisters or Mystical Space Typhoon. But, you know, just, you know, they don't really, Pendulum Magicians don't really have any form of protection against, like, mass destruction, aside, unless they're going for, like, Beals or something. So just, if your deck's able to run these, any form of this, like, Kaijus are good, Sphere Mode especially, because chances are they may have, like, 3 monsters on board when it comes to your turn, so you can Sphere Mode them. And you know, then they lose their Bagooska, they lose their Decode or Electrumite or whatever, and if they got Decode Talker, maybe they have something other than the Bagooska that it's pointing to, so they'll have 3 monsters. You could Raw them, you could Kaiju over their Bagooska, or their Time Star, and or, you know, the board wipe, of course, really good. But then at that point, you still have to deal with their back row. So, you know, whatever they have set face down, that's what you'd usually want to go for. But of course, Cosmic Cyclone is another good option. This is good going first or second, just because you can set it going first, and you can remove their scales, like their double iris, that way they won't get the search effect off of it. or if if you're in a pinch, you can just remove that time pendulum graph. Since I do think that a lot of lists will only run one, so if you can remove that time pendulum graph, you're looking really good. A couple other good cards for going first, stuff like anti-spell fragments, obviously, pendulum hate, just solemn strike and stop a pendulum summon, and then all those resources go to the graveyard. And then dimensional barrier, some more pendulum hate. Like as we're gonna be getting the reprints for Ghost Ogre and Troll Unlocked, so if you are somebody who's kind of concerned about having a build in a budget way to fend off against them, of course Ghost Ogre and Troll and Lockbird are two that will be getting reprints, and those will be a good way, especially Troll and Lockbird. I should actually reiterate, I don't remember if I said this before, but with Droll and Lockbird, again, always try not to Droll and Lock them unless they have a monster on the field. Again, just be concerned about the gamma. I don't know what the meta is going to look like. I don't know what the meta list will look like, but I just know for me personally, that's how I run my build, and it's still fairly consistent. It does lose a little bit of its consistency running the gamma, but I don't feel like I feel like the trade-off is pretty fair, actually. Both out of the way, thank you for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. Please comment if you have any thoughts on what else may be good against Pendulum Magicians, if there's anything that I said that you disagree with. So yeah, thank you very much. Have a good one.